Audio Jungle.
If you're like most of us, you're no stranger to anxiety, stress, and depression. But what if there were a medicine that could take care of all these problems and many more, now and in the future? Introducing the pill you take once that makes you the best you can be. Fixitol. Fixitol is not available in North America, South America, Asia, Australia, Africa, Europe, Antarctica, or the North Pole.
In the real world, while some conditions require medication, there's no shortcut to being our best selves. Hard work and good tools can give you the long-term skills to live your life to the fullest. If you're looking for help, talk to a psychologist. Psychotherapy can help you effectively manage stress, anxiety, and depression. Side effects of psychotherapy may include better health, improved relationships, and higher self-esteem. Do not engage in psychotherapy while pursuing miracle cures that do not exist.
What is psychotherapy? It's first and foremost a relationship between you and your psychotherapist that offers you the space to be listened to in a very specific way and the freedom to be truly yourself without any need to pretend to be something you are not. ICP defines psychotherapy in its broadest sense as focusing on the potential and dynamics of human relationships. It facilitates the individual, couple, family or group's possibilities to create more satisfying relationships and outcomes in relation to dilemmas in their lives. Who goes to psychotherapy? Psychotherapy is open to anyone, adult, child, family, couple or group of people. People work with a psychotherapist for a lot of different reasons, sometimes because they are depressed or feeling suicidal, maybe they are anxious or trying to come to terms with a loss. It could be a relationship or family issue, addiction or extreme stress that brings someone to see a psychotherapist. Sometimes people see a psychotherapist to try and figure out what they want to do with the rest of their lives. The reason for going to a psychotherapist is as unique as the individual.
One question I get asked with some frequency is, what is the difference between counseling and psychotherapy? Counseling typically has a predetermined start and end. The insurance provider will have a set amount of sessions the individual is permitted to have within a set amount of time. Psychotherapy is an ongoing therapeutic relationship with no predetermined end. In counseling, the individual typically describes how the symptoms have manifested and is looking for a solution to the perceived problem, whereas psychotherapy explores the underlying issues that may have caused the symptoms to manifest. Let's use an analogy to differentiate between the two. Let's say that while riding your bike, you fall and scrape your knee. Counseling would help you clean and bandage your wound so that you can get back on your bike again as soon as possible. Counseling should also provide the resources you need to clean and bandage your knee if you should happen to fall off your bike again, whereas psychotherapy would explore the underlying causes of why you fell off your bike in the first place.
Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, what is solution-focused therapy? Solution-focused therapy, which is sometimes referred to as solution-focused brief therapy, was developed by DeShazer and Berg in the 1980s. And there is no theory behind this therapy. A lot of modern modalities have some sort of theory associated with them. Solution-focused therapy does not. It's not theory-driven. It's considered a positive approach, and it's also considered a constructivist approach. So solution-focused therapy is considered to be collaborative and collegial, as opposed to confrontational, instructive, or needing to have an interpretation component. Many of the modern theories that we see do have confrontational instructive, and interpretive components to them. Now, even though solution-focused therapy is not theory-based, there are principles and techniques associated with it. The first is that problems form in the context of human interaction. Now, this is a bit different than, say, reality therapy, which looks at problems formed because of relationships. In solution-focused therapy, interactions could include relationships, but they're not exclusively relationships. The objective in solution-focused therapy is to encourage a client to do something different. So the idea here is that any change is a good change. Any change moves somebody further away from the problem. Now, of course, we recognize in mental health treatment that all change isn't good. There can be negative change as well. For example, if someone comes into treatment because they are consuming too much alcohol and the change they make is to consume more alcohol, that would be recognized as negative. In solution-focused therapy, there isn't really an emphasis on directionality too much, although generally, of course, a positive change would be recognized as superior to a negative change. In solution-focused therapy, the client is the expert. The modality does recognize that in all therapy there is a hierarchy, but the wisdom of the client is seen as the most valuable contribution into the therapeutic process. The therapist is not an expert, and again, there's no real instructive component to this therapy. One of the goals of the therapist in solution-focused therapy is to help the client to make contact with forgotten and unnoticed wisdom. So the client comes to therapy with everything they need to make the change that would eliminate the problem. We see this component in a number of other therapeutic modalities as well. A type of this component we would see in person-centered therapy, Rogerian therapy. So another feature of solution-focused therapy is that resistance helps the therapist to know how to help the client. So resistance is interpreted as positive. It adds knowledge to the therapeutic process. So in a way, with resistance being thought of as valuable, solution-focused therapy is similar to motivational interviewing. So to deal with resistance, a therapist tries to build cooperation. And in solution-focused therapy, this is connecting the present to the future. The past is largely ignored in solution-focused therapy, except for exceptions to the problem. So this would be when the problem was not around, when it was not apparent. Of course, this would occur in the past, and this would be emphasized. But most of the time would be spent on the present and how things can get better, can get more positive in the future. Another technique in solution-focused therapy is reframing. And this technique in this therapy is very similar to what we see in some cognitive behavioral therapies, like Beckian cognitive therapy or rational emotive behavior therapy developed by Albert Ellis. So new meaning can be developed as the therapist listens to the client's narrative. And this new meaning would be conveyed to the client and would usually, we would hope, end up in the problem being eliminated or being reduced in severity and a positive direction being adopted. Goals in solution-focused therapy need to be small and achievable. So remember, with this therapy, almost any change is favored over no change, particularly any positive change. So the goals being small and achievable is consistent with that mentality, with that ideology. A lot of other modalities have large goals, and sometimes it's difficult to break those down into smaller objectives. Solution-focused therapy addresses this directly by doing away with large goals and instead favoring small goals that can be measured. So there's a pragmatic quality here to goal setting in solution-focused therapy. In this modality, there is no need for a detailed description of the problem. A lot of the principles and techniques of solution-focused therapy are quite a bit different than other modalities, as I mentioned. This particular principle really differentiates solution focus quite a bit, particularly from cognitive behavioral therapies. Usually with a version of CBT, it's important to have a detailed description of the problem, problems are different for everybody. Each individual is unique. Solution-focused therapy doesn't really have this same emphasis. A solution-focused therapist would be okay with having a detailed description of the problem. It's just considered not necessary. There are a number of other techniques that are fairly popular with solution-focused therapy. One is the miracle question, and this is a question that's asked to the client, where the clients ask if they went to bed and when they woke up the problem was gone, how would they know? So in a sense, one of the purposes of this question is diagnostic. Another, of course, is to find out what can be changed to alleviate the problem. Seeing how somebody would recognize the problem is gone if they just woke up and it was miraculously gone can be helpful. And the miracle question is used by a number of integrative therapists that integrate solution-focused therapy into their primary modality or modalities. Another common technique is the exception to the problem, or the identification of the exception. In solution-focused therapy, it's believed that a problem can't be continuous throughout a client's life. There have to be times when it's not there. And these exceptions are valuable because they can help the therapist and the client realize how to find a solution. This is very consistent with a minimal focus on the past. This is the only area where a solution-focused therapist, as I mentioned, would focus on the past. Another common technique in solution-focused therapy is scaling, and we see this in a number of other modalities as well. So this is often done with a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most severe manifestation of a problem. Now this is consistent with the goals being measurable in solution-focused therapy. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of solution-focused therapy? Well, one of the advantages of this modality is that it has been generally supported in the research as being effective. It can be argued that solution-focused therapy has not really shown its effectiveness with a wide range of disorders, particularly disorders that are usually thought of as more severe. But as I mentioned, generally it has been shown to be effective. The therapy is also brief. Now this can be considered an advantage or a disadvantage depending on one's point of view. Usually though, I would view this as a positive if a modality has the capability of being brief. Another positive aspect to this modality is small and achievable goals. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I do believe a lot of other modalities set very ambitious goals that can be difficult to achieve, and this can be discouraging for a client. Now, in terms of disadvantages, there are some limitations and criticisms we see for solution-focused therapy. The first is that the reality is constructed through conversation, meaning solution-focused therapy is a constructivist approach. The idea is that the therapist and the client co-construct solutions, but in a sense really co-construct reality. So this has a postmodern philosophical orientation to it, similar to what we see with narrative therapy. Like many aspects of this modality, this limitation could also be viewed as a positive. I think one of the problems that I have with the constructivist perspective we see with solution-focused therapy and with narrative therapy is that it seems to sidestep empiricism. It seems to sidestep the scientific method, meaning there's no universal truth with solution-focused therapy. I don't think this is always the most useful way to frame a therapeutic modality, and I believe there's inherent problems when you don't have a universal truth to work with. But this is a matter of opinion. As I mentioned, some people see this as a positive aspect. Another common criticism of this modality is that it doesn't fully respect a client's history, and that's because there's no detailed description of the problem required in solution-focused therapy. So the conversation in therapy tends to stay more on the surface and doesn't have a lot of depth. Other criticisms include that solution-focused therapy is relativistic, minimalistic, and the brief therapy component that it has, as I mentioned, could also be a positive. But in terms of the negative side of it, there's a danger that if a client has a more serious mental health disorder or one that necessitates longer-term care, that need would be overlooked by the brief orientation we see in solution-focused therapy. So overall, solution-focused therapy is an interesting therapy. Compared to a lot of other modalities, it looks at the client's problem and possible solutions from a different angle. It's not without its limitations. However, I see solution-focused therapy as a modality that can be easily integrated into other modalities. As I mentioned before, it's not unusual for some of the techniques of solution-focused therapy to make their way into cognitive behavioral therapies as well as a number of other modalities. I hope you found this description of solution-focused therapy to be interesting. Thanks for watching. Hi Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm all right. I'm feeling a little weird lately, and I can't explain it. I feel off.
You feel off?
I just feel really off and not like myself, and just not like I think a normal person should be feeling right now.
So you're not feeling like a normal person should be feeling.
I'm feeling a little anxious, a little jittery, a little, I don't know. I just feel weird.
All right, so you have some anxiety, but you're not really certain of the feeling.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I want to ask you a bit of an unusual question that is going to take some imagination to answer.
Okay.
I want you to bear with me if you can.
Okay.
All right. So let's say that we know you have this problem that you're describing that's partially anxiety-based, at least. Say that you were to go home tonight
Mm-hmm.
and attend to your usual chores, and you're to go to sleep.
Okay.
All right. So you're asleep, and sometime during the night, a miracle occurs, and the problem you're having right now,
Mm-hmm.
in its entirety, is gone. So the next morning, you wake up, but you don't know the miracle has occurred.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
So at this point, as you wake up, you don't know the miracle has occurred.
Mm-hmm.
How would you recognize that the problem is gone?
I think I would just feel better, like, I don't know, maybe not be jittery, I guess.
Not be jittery?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe I would just feel better on the inside.
All right, try to think. That's good. Try to think specifically, like you first wake up.
Okay.
Let's go kind of through your day. So you first wake up. This miracle has occurred, but you don't know it's occurred.
Okay.
So you don't know about the miracle.
Mm-hmm.
You wake up believing that you would still have the problem,
Okay.
even though the problem's not there.
Okay.
So let's move through the day and see when you would be able to recognize, or what you would recognize.
So
is different.
I think during the first half of my day, I would like when I wake up, I do all the normal things. I make my breakfast, shower, shave, all of that stuff. And I generally don't feel jittery then. It's just when I start to actually go out of the house and just thinking about getting to work and stuff, it starts to just get a little jittery on the inside.
So you may not notice the problem's gone when you're still at home.
Correct. But I think that once I actually got like to my office space, I think that that's when I'll start to say, hey, you're not feeling all jittery, your palms are not sweating, you're not really anxious about going into work today. And something just starts to click, and it's like, hey, just feels right. Instead of this feels wrong and I shouldn't be here, or I shouldn't want to feel like this.
All right, so the moment you get to work is when you think you'd really recognize that something about the problem has changed, that it might be gone.
I think so, and I think more I would actually understand or see the miracle had occurred is actually when I started to interact with my coworkers, because I think that that's where a lot of the jitteriness occurs, or at least that's what I've been noticing, that I'm seeing that anytime I'm really starting to interact with my coworkers, that I my heart starts to race, my hand starts to get sweaty. I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, and I think that if all of that started to disappear, then I think that I would have noticed that.
So that moment when you start to interact with your coworkers, you would notice that you're not reacting in the way that you're used to reacting.
Correct.
Which sounds almost like intense anxiety or panic. The way you describe it.
I never really thought about it like that, because I think that that's something that's naturally always been happening, and it really never occurred to me to look at my work situation to see if I eliminated that or those people, that all of the anxiety would go away. Because I think that even though when I come home I'm still thinking about work and stuff is still happening and I'm still worried about how I'm going to work with these people, that I still am a little jittery, but I'm not as jittery or sweaty or whatever, especially when I'm at the office.
So the largest chance you're going to recognize the problem is gone is during that time in the office.
Correct.
That's really, so there might be an after effect that that would be absent on your way home.
Correct.
But you feel like the symptoms, the problem, are really strongest at the office.
Correct. Yes. Right. Yes. I would say 100% yes. Especially when I'm interacting with just people, especially large groups of people, I think that that's when it really pops in, and I just don't know what to do with myself. And I think I could see that if we had a group meeting, I think I would really notice it then, because I wouldn't be worried about what I'm saying or how other people are viewing me, or if people think I'm dumb or anything like that. I think that I would just be able to say what I needed to say.
So if the problem wasn't there, you'd be relaxed and confident during these meetings.
Yeah, I think I would be. I think be really confident, and also I would be very sure of myself, because I would know that this is what I'm saying is right and what I'm doing is right, and I wouldn't have to worry about if my coworker's talking behind my back or if my coworker's laughing. Like, I wouldn't even care if they're on their phones, because I know that what I'm presenting is going to be right.
Right. So it seems like I've used this question, which we call the miracle question.
Okay.
Right. It seems like it's helped you to identify what's going on a little bit. It sounds like a social anxiety type symptom set that you have going on.
Okay.
Right. And that's something we can certainly work on.
Perfect.
Right.
Perfect.
And maybe it's giving you some insight into how that social anxiety seems to function throughout the day.
Yeah.
When it's more intense at work, when it's
Mhm.
less intense as you come home.
Mm-hmm.
And in the morning when you wake up, really it doesn't seem like it's too bad at all.
No.
So it's giving you an idea how those symptoms ebb and flow through the day and what they might mean, what might be causing them.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense, I think.
We'll work on it.
Okay.
Work on it to put some more framework around it. But give that some thought, what's going on with the problem in terms of when it occurs, you're recognizing how it's work,
Mm-hmm.
and reflect on that a bit, and then I'll see you again in about a week, and we'll start moving through and see what we can do about this social anxiety.
Okay, perfect.
Does that sound good, Jeff?
That sounds wonderful.
I'll see you then. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 meaning you got as far as you think you want to take things, and 0 meaning the total opposite, not there at all yet. So where are you right now between 1 and 0?
Probably a 6.
A 6?
Yeah.
Okay, Jonathan. So that's 6. Tell me some of the differences between the 6 that you're at right now. My immediate reaction was almost to congratulate you on that. Can I do that?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So that's 6, and what 1 or 0 was? How's it different?
I think at 1 or 0, I would just kind of take what was in front of me on a daily basis and not think of the greater scheme of my actions. I would dawdle a lot and procrastinate.
And so how is it different now that you're in 6?
That I know that every day I have an agenda that I want to accomplish by the end of the day, so that I can leave my day feeling like I've left my day.
Okay.
And I also am in a situation right now where I'm only in my office 3 days a week. So I work towards really leaving my office for 2 of those days, so I can care for my child those 2 days. And if I was at a 10, I think I would kind of start the day, end the day, and leave everything behind at my office.
Okay. So you're at a 6. If I were to ask your colleagues, and I don't know if they know about your task that you've given yourself to move into this direction, but suppose they knew and I were to ask them the same scale, where would they say that you are at?
I think that they would agree that I'm probably at a 6 as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And what would be some of the differences that they notice that they would point out to me as a clear sign of your being already at 6?
That I have been more forthcoming with them about information as it's come up. That I've expressed my thoughts on the direction that we should head. And that I've been kind of more frank with them about their involvement in all of our future plans.
Right.
So.
Sounds like a serious person.
Yeah.
Bro. I'm glad you still laugh about it. Yeah? Okay. All right. I see. And there were some examples that we talked about. You said this process of hiring someone else and what you did in order to make that happen. On the same scale, where would that be?
Well, I think that's at a 6 too.
That's at a 6 too?
I'm at a pretty steady 6 right now.
Oh, okay. Okay. And the way how you went about deciding for the program for next year and making it longer term, where's that on the scale?
That's probably at about an 8.
That's probably at an 8.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay. And let's not talk about 10, but you say you're at a 6, and I'm curious, how would you know that you have moved from 6 to 7?
I would have more of a realization that there will always be more to be done, but I've done as much as I can in a given day.
Yeah.
I guess just more acceptance of the fact that I'll never be able to accomplish the full amount of work that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. I think at this time I'd like to take a short break and
Hi Simon, how you doing today?
I'm doing alright, Dr. Grande.
You're doing alright? Good to hear. How have you been feeling over the last few weeks?
I've been doing okay, but there's kind of one thing that I've been dealing with recently. So I took a new position at work, and part of that position is now like going to these meetings, right? And every time that I go to the meeting, I just get like super anxious when I think about like having to talk to my coworkers, or if I have to like give a presentation that day. And it's really like, I think it's just really affecting like my ability to really do the meetings. Like it's really bad.
It's disruptive, it sounds like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Has it ever stopped you from completing a meeting?
Yeah, actually, one of the meetings the other week, I had to like step out and kind of like go to the bathroom and take a couple like deep breaths and like wash my face off to kind of just like calm down as much as I could. And I didn't think I was gone for that long, but when I came back in, like I realized that I'd been gone for like 10-15 minutes. So like I missed some key points, and I had to go grab another coworker to kind of like catch me up after the meeting.
Catch up,
so,
yeah. So when you were when you stepped out of the meeting, were you the focus of attention at that point, or was somebody else speaking?
No, it was someone else. It was someone else speaking, but I was up next, so I was thinking about getting ready to present, and that's when I was kind of like able to slip out.
All right. So you think of it as like what happened that moment is kind of a panic attack?
No, I don't think it's a panic attack, because it really only happens when I have to either meet someone new or give a presentation or just kind of like be around people that I don't know very well, you know. Like I think since it only happens at that time, like I don't know.
What are the physical symptoms? How do you feel physically, like particularly at that moment when you realized that you needed to leave and go take a moment?
I was just kind of like anxious. I was lightheaded. Like my breathing was fine, but like my heart rate was increasing, and like my hands were getting a little balmy.
All right. So there's maybe some symptoms of panic mixed in there, like because you have some of the kind of physiological symptoms of panic, but more like you're describing the way you're framing is kind of like a strong anxiety. So let's go with that. Let's say it's a strong anxiety. Seems like it's similar to panic. Maybe kind of what you're describing seems like a social anxiety, what we call social anxiety. So it's when people are get very anxious and have those physiological symptoms that match that severe anxiety when they have to interact socially, especially with a group of people. And particularly if that group of people is evaluating them in some way. Like if they're all looking at you when you're talking.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right. So you think maybe that's what's going on?
Yeah,
social anxiety?
Yeah, actually, I've heard that before, but I didn't think that was like social anxiety, yeah.
So now that you kind of maybe recognize what it is, can you think back and identify how long you've had this type of reaction?
I mean, I've had it, I guess now that I think about it, I've had it for like at least a good portion of my life. Like I've always been kind of nervous, like when I'm meeting new people, or like I said, when I have to give a presentation or get up in front of people. Sometimes like I wouldn't know what to say, and I would like kind of freeze and just really feel like really awkward.
So a really awkward feeling, and you've had it for some time now. Maybe you're noticing it now because of or more now because of the job that has these meetings.
Right.
So maybe you're being kind of pushed into situations that are more likely to trigger it.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense.
Yeah, so maybe you really haven't changed too much, but your situation has changed. And you're being moved into more stressful situations. All right. So let's go into the assumption that you've had what we refer to as social anxiety for some time. Have there ever been points in that period of time when you feel like you've had this, where there have been exceptions, where the symptoms really didn't come up when you otherwise might have expected them to come up?
Well, I mean, like back in the day during like late high school, and then when I was in college, like when all my friends wanted to go out to parties, like I was kind of like nervous going out, but then I also didn't want to be the guy that like was just sitting home all the time. So I mean, it made it kind of easy just to like pregame a little bit and just like have a couple of shots before I go out, and that would calm me down at least enough that I would be like okay talking to people I didn't know.
All right, so drinking really reduced that social anxiety.
Yeah.
All right, and that seemed to work for you back in that context.
Mm.
How would that be received, do you think, in your work environment now?
Well, I mean, I can't just take a couple shots before work.
Right, so
yeah.
Something that worked then, but maybe not as productive right now.
Yeah.
All right, but it's good that you're able to identify that. So you kind of see where I'm getting in terms of you were able to find an exception.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe that one in particular we can't really use,
right?
For, because of the work situation.
Mm.
But I think that you're connecting with the idea. Think back. Is there any other times when there's been an exception?
I guess like, actually it's kind of weird because like back again like during college, it was always like awkward when I was in other classes talking to people I didn't know, or like going to parties talking to people I didn't know. But one of the places that I kind of really felt comfortable was ironically in the theater. I used to do acting back in school, and back during like when I was doing plays and stuff, like I felt very comfortable just like meeting people, getting on stage and like doing stuff in front of other people. So I don't know, I guess I never really thought about that, like why it was so comfortable back then, but like not now.
Well, let's take a look and see what was different about that context. So you were acting. When were you acting?
It was like early college, first couple of years.
Right. And when in the day?
At night.
An evening?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And how invested in it were you? Like how serious was it for you?
I mean, I wasn't like that serious. It was really kind of like a hobby. So the way I got into it was like, I just happened to be sitting in my house one day, and like I logged on to the university website, and I saw that they were just having applications for Dracula. So I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. And then I noticed it was like in 20 minutes. I was like, oh, I'm not doing anything. So I just kind of went and did it. And I mean, acting wasn't like my major. It wasn't what I was studying, but it was like fun, and it covered all my electives. So.
All right, it was fun. It helped you achieve some of your objectives. Were you paid for it?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Did you need it to survive?
No.
No. All right. How do you feel about your job? In terms of like you compare your job, because that's where you're having the anxiety now.
Right.
And compare that to the acting where you weren't paid, maybe you didn't necessarily need it, it was fun. How's your job stack up?
Well, I mean, that's like completely different. Yeah, it's like apples and oranges. Because, if I like go try out for a play and don't make it, it's kind of like whatever. But if I keep going to these meetings and keep like acting weird and just kind of like looking dumb and not doing well at the meetings, there's a possibility I could get fired. Like I doubt if they would actually do that, but like it's not helping me to be so like helpless at these meetings,
So in a way, there's more at stake.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when you were having fun, and there was less at stake, you were less anxious. Like back in the acting.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So it's like when I know I might lose something from like just being awkward, like that's when it kind of like gets worse.
It seems like it, yeah, when there's the potential to lose something or the perceived fear that you're going to lose something.
Okay.
Whereas with the acting, it seems like you had fun with that, but you could take it or leave it.
Right, yeah.
So
okay.
There was that kind of feel back then to that, from what you're describing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if one possible exception, that's one exception, and one possible application of that in terms of looking at the solution would be to try to find ways to make those meetings more fun, those interactions more fun. That's something we can explore, so that's a possibility. Any other exceptions in your past?
Well, I guess like when I think about it, one of the things that makes you feel like, I guess, more comfortable talking with other people is either like if I know them like pretty well, or if I'm hanging out with someone that I know well. Like I don't have any kind of problems with this with like my close friends, or even friends that I like see in class or like talk to every now and then. If I at least know them to some degree, then it's a little bit easier, I guess.
All right, so if you know someone and you're comfortable with them, even if there's several people, as long as you know them all, that type of group isn't really as intimidating for you.
Yeah, no, not if it's just like a group of people, like a group of friends or anything.
All right. So how about the relationships you had with your coworkers, like specifically that are in that meeting? Well, how many are in that meeting?
It's usually between like 6 to 10.
6 and 10. Okay. And how many would you say that you know well enough to where you wouldn't be anxious if it was just them?
Well, I mean, it's a new position that I just moved into, so I actually only know one guy, just because he was transferred over to this department around the same time I was, and we knew each other kind of well in the last department. So he's really the only guy that I, know pretty well in there.
All right. So if you had a relationship with the other people that's similar to the one you have with him, what would that do with your anxiety?
I mean, I guess it might make it easier. Like if it's like I'm fine talking to just him, or like I'm fine talking to like the groups of people that I knew in the last department. So I mean, I guess it just kind of makes sense that if I got to know the people that I was presenting to, like it'd probably make it a little bit easier. Yeah.
So it'd make it a little less anxiety provoking. It'd be a little more casual, maybe a little more fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So there's a theme here, I guess, with your exceptions, right? Like so, having fun and knowing the people well seem to be helpful to you in these situations. And what you're describing now is your work environment is new, doesn't seem fun, and you don't really know the people well.
Right.
So you're struggling with the anxiety part. So is there a way that in this work environment you can get to know some of the other people or all the other people in the meeting?
I mean, I can try to, but like that's just tough because it's like I would, if I like pull them aside just to talk to them or something, like I would be nervous even then. Like even if it was just me like one-on-one with someone that I don't know at all. Like I think it would be tough to do. Like how would I get through the anxiety of that?
Would that be as anxiety provoking as talking in front of all of them?
No, not if it was like one-on-one.
All right, so it would be less anxiety, but it would still be enough to concern you.
Right.
All right. What about building off the friendship you already have? Like you said you know the one guy. What if you kind of arranged it, if you could do this, to where it was you and him, and then like one other person you wanted to build a relationship with?
Yeah, I guess I could do that, because like I guess that's what when I think about it, like that was one of the things that I used to do back in college too when we were partying. Like if I went to a party, if I at least knew like one good friend there, then it was at least like bearable to like open up and talk to people. So yeah, maybe if I have him with me, like as I'm going around meeting these people, that might work actually.
All right. Does that potential solution seem like something you could follow through with?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if we're totally ruling out like the taking a couple shots before work, like I can't.
Yeah, that's probably something we need to rule out. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think I could probably do that.
All right. So let's try that. So for the next, I'll see you again in a week. So between now and when I see you next, you're gonna have another one of these meetings.
Yeah.
You are, okay. So you'll have potentially some more anxiety there. Will you have opportunities to, with your friend, meet and talk to some other people?
I think so, yeah, because we usually, like, people from the office usually go out to lunch together all the time, so I can maybe try to see if, like, me, him, and just a couple others can go out for lunch or something.
Great. All right, that sounds like a good plan. Does that make sense to you? You think that's a good plan?
Yeah, I think that might work. I mean, I'm willing to at least try it.
All right. Why don't you try that out? So try to build in the next week as many quality relationships as would make sense in the context of your work.
Right.
Right. So I would hope that could be maybe 2 or 3 within a week. People you could spend some time with. Now it's going to take probably some more time to build really strong, close relationships, but to become comfortable with a few people, would be a good objective, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe say like 2 or 3.
Yeah, sure.
2 or 3 coworkers between now and next week. All right. So let's make that the objective for this week, and then I'll see you next week, and we'll check in and see how you've progressed with that.
All right. Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next week.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Neha. I'll be your therapist today. And what do you like to be called?
Steph is good.
Steph is good. Well, nice to meet you, Steph.
Nice to meet you too.
And may I ask you, what are your expectations of today's session?
Probably to discuss some issues I'm having at home involving drinking. My family's been bringing it to my attention that they would like me to drink less. I don't know if it's a serious issue. I feel like I can function and get by, but I have been drinking every day, and some days I don't drink as much because I'm busy, so it can be better.
It can be better. And how long has it been since you started drinking?
Let's see, probably undergraduate for college. I was drinking, a couple times a week with friends, going out and stuff, and that's probably when it really started.
And has it ever happened before?
I guess initially it started back in high school, just very irregularly,
Tell me more about that.
Going out with friends and I guess just being social was part of the atmosphere.
Okay. And how did you deal with it then? Drinking?
I probably relied on my friends a lot. Sometimes I drink too much, and when you're younger, how you don't know how to, moderate what you're drinking, so you get sick or whatever. But I mean, now when I drink, I don't get sick, but I think I get really stressed during my work day and everything, and the best way to unwind is to go home and have a few glasses.
And who else in your social environment can tell that your drinking is a problem?
My husband and my close family, my sister, my parents, they've made comments about me drinking too much and slurring my words, even though I don't think I am, and just falling asleep from drinking too much wine, and they've made comments.
They made comments, okay. And what changes has happened since you took the steps to address this issue?
I think because we've been communicating as a family, there hasn't been as much distress as there could have been with the whole situation. I have talked to my doctor about it, and he referred me to see you.
See you, okay.
So.
Well, thanks for being here today. And let me ask you this. So suppose you go to bed tonight and you go to sleep, and a miracle happens, and you wake up in the morning and you no longer have this issue. Please tell me, what signs would show that, you no longer have a drinking problem?
Immediately, probably I wouldn't have a headache.
a headache.
But then,
Mhm.
I guess just feeling healthy and having energy and more time. Well, I guess you asked for the initial feeling, so I guess no headache.
No headache, okay. And how will your life altogether be different, without the drinking problem?
I would have more time for my kids, probably, rather than going home and, drinking to relax and everything. I could read them a story or a good night story or spend time with them.
And tell me how other people will think that your drinking is different.
It's different.
Mm-hmm.
They would probably say the same thing, that I looked healthy and that I was more with it and organized with my life, because I think when I'm drinking, it takes away from my professional life and my home life and everything. So
Tell me more about that.
I think when I'm drinking, it makes it so it's harder to wake up, and then I'm disheveled in the morning, and getting the kids off to school, and it's just the whole day is affected by it. So.
All right. You mentioned earlier that some days you do not drink as much. So tell me about these days where you don't drink as much as you do.
I guess it's the really busy days when I'm going right from work, or putting the kids on the bus to work, to taking them off the bus, to going to take them to an activity, a sports activity or something, and usually I'm drinking coffee those days, and there's other outlets but for feeling well, but I don't know, sometimes I don't drink as much, which is good.
Yeah, it's very good. I agree.
According to everyone. So.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you now in terms of having some control, with your drinking?
I would say I'm a 5.
You're 5.
Because I do have a lot still to work on. Because even though I feel like I'm very positive about it, I feel like, I have identified that I do drink regularly, and it probably would help to, yeah.
And how long do you think it will take you to get 1 point off the scale?
Probably finding other outlets, like exercising more, becoming more involved with the kids, maybe finding activities that make me happy, that don't include going to a bar or,
That's a good one.
finding different friends to hang out with that don't drink so much.
Yeah. And how will you get through the rest of your day today after this session?
I think I'm going to try to keep busy, because I've found that's worked in the past.
Okay. And do you think we have achieved enough in today's session?
I found it helpful reflecting on my behaviors and everything. I'm happy that we got to talk about it. I do want to talk more about it, since it's causing a problem for the people who love me. So.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for coming, and and hope to see you in the next session.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
With a 10-year-old student who has been bullied, I'm going to use solution-focused therapy to facilitate the counseling session. Hello, AJ. How are you today?
Good.
Good. Well, I'm glad you came to school this morning. How you been?
Good and bad.
Good and bad. Well, coming to school is a great start, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're in the 5th grade. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. And you're in Mr. Meyer's class.
Right.
Right. What's your favorite subject?
Math.
Math. What do you like about math?
Everything that we learn new, because all he does is add more stuff to it.
More stuff like what?
Like if we're talking about multiplication, like he might add more digits to like what we multiply.
Okay. Do you have any other subjects that you like?
Writing.
Writing. And what do you like about writing? When we get to free write, or we get to write anything we want, and I like to write scary stories. Oh, I heard you say you like to write scary stories. How long have you been writing scary stories?
Since I was in 4th grade.
Oh, and your scary stories
Are funny.
Oh, they're funny scary stories. So you like scary stories that's fun. Give me an example.
Like, I made a story, and this man had married this girl. They had 2 kids, and the girl didn't like her son's girlfriend, so he beat her. So she beat her up, and then that's when her son came back and slapped her because he heard about it, and then that's when they never spoke to each other again, and that's when he killed her.
Wow. Did you share that story with anybody?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Oh,
Gotta finish it.
Oh, you're still finishing. So it's going to be a chapter book?
It's got 3 parts.
3 parts. It has 3 parts. Oh, okay. Well, do you have any other activities that you like doing? Like outside of subjects, do you participate in any sports or?
Yes.
Oh,
Basketball.
Sports. Got a little smile out of you for that. So basketball. How long have you been playing basketball?
Since I was in 4th grade.
Since 4th grade. Do you like basketball?
Mm-hmm.
What do you like about it?
That we get to make shots, play games, and like at the championship we might have a little party and stuff.
Okay. A little part after the championship. So you won before? Yes.
Yeah.
What position do you play?
2.
2? What's a 2?
Where I'm like covering, like there's like this part, so this part's on the side, and there's a 4 right there and a 2 right here. I'm covering the front area.
Oh, the front. Okay. Do you do anything else besides basketball?
Play soccer.
Do you play soccer also? Okay, so you're a sports kind of girl, right? What, tell me about your friends.
My friends are fun.
How many
Yeah.
friends do you have?
More than 100.
Oh, wow. More than 100. Okay.
I like friends in every grade level.
In every grade level. So you like the little kids and the older kids. Wow. So that
And I help
must
my
mean,
coach.
oh, you help your coach. So I'm hearing you say you have friends in every grade level. So that means you're probably a friendly person. Think so?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I found out that you came to talk to me today because you were having some issues. Something that's bothering you. What's bothering you?
I'm getting bullied.
You're getting bullied. Okay. So who is bullying you?
4 kids from one is in 3 different classes, and the other one's in my class.
Okay, so I heard you say 1 is in your classroom and 3 are in a different classroom? And are they 5th graders? They are 5th graders. Were you once friends with them? So you've never been friends with them? Not even the one that's inside your classroom? Okay. So what makes you think they're bullying you?
Because they're calling me names, and they're saying they're calling me names, hitting me and stuff, and telling kids that I'm mean and people shouldn't be friends with me.
Okay. So how does that make you feel?
Sad, because I'm not really a mean person.
Yeah. With you telling me that you're friends with kids all in different grade levels, I know that you're probably not a mean person. So, if you could rate the way you feel from caused from the bullying, when I say rate, I mean like if you had to rate on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 means that it doesn't really bother you. The bullying doesn't really bother you. And 10 means it bothers you so much that you just can't take it, or you don't even want to come to school. Like, that's severe. If you could rate how you feel from the bullying, what would you rate?
A 7.
A 7? Okay, a 7 is pretty serious.
I would give it a 1 because like it doesn't bother me that much, but I want it to stop. But it kind of does bother me.
Okay, I can understand that bullying, when someone calling you names could be very bothersome. Like, your name is AJ. You don't want anybody calling you anything but that, unless they're calling you something sweet like princess or something like that. Man, I'm sure that would probably be okay. I want you to think about this. Here's a question I want you to think about. If you could go home and have dinner with your family, or whatever it is that you do when you go home, like I said, the dinner, maybe play video games. Do you have any video games, like a gaming system? What kind of gaming system do you have?
I have a Wii and I have an iPad.
Okay. Oh, those sure did spark some interest in you. I see you smiling. Okay, so if you could go home and have dinner and play on your iPad or your Wii, take your bath, oops, I forgot your homework, do your homework, and then go to bed, and when you woke up in the morning, everything was perfect. You could have the perfect day. What would your day look like?
Wake up, brush my teeth, wash my face, say goodbye to my mom and dad, go to school, hang out with my friends, talk and stuff, get our work done, hang out with some of the bullies and try to be friends with them, and that's it.
Oh, sounds good. So your perfect day with you getting along with everyone, including those people that have been doing some not so nice things to you, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just want to let you know that things are going to get better. I'm going to have a group meeting with some of the people that you mentioned, and they're going to help me help you feel better. Okay? And in turn, at the same time, those students are going to start to feel better too, because something's going on there to where they're having to call you names or put their hands on you or do other inappropriate things. Okay? So we're all going to work together to make sure that everyone feels happy and good. But we're going to do that in a couple of days. But what I want you to think about now is 2 things that you can do once you leave here to make your 7, you feel like a 7, maybe become a 6 or a 5. What do you think you could do?
I could try to be nice to them.
Okay, be nice to them.
Help them out.
And help them out with
and
what?
ask them out. Ask them like why are they mean to me and stuff.
Okay. So you think if you be nice to them and help them out, what do you mean by help them out?
Like help them with their work, their homework, anything they have trouble with.
Like a tutor. Like a tutor. Okay. That's a start. And what we'll do when you come back to meet with me, you're going to try those things and let me know if they improve the situation or not. Because I can understand you saying a 7, that means that it's really bothering you. And at the same time, you're doing a wonderful job in school. You're still an AB student. You're getting your everything done. You're playing basketball, so you're a happy student coming to school, making those good grades. So we just want to get this problem here under control. Is there anything that you want to ask me before you leave? Or let me know. So you think that the things that you said you're going to try, you think those might help? Okay. Well, I'll be interested in knowing how those things worked out for you when we meet back in a couple of days. Okay?
Psychotherapy, also known as talk therapy, can kind of seem like a mixed bag. You might have heard people say how awesome it can be, but just as many might say that it's unhelpful or even harmful. For every friend or family member who swears that therapy saved their lives, it seems like there's another who says that they are never going back. Most researchers do agree that psychotherapy is effective, but flawed studies make it hard to know exactly how effective it is, and it's especially tough to figure out what'll work for someone on an individual level. As questions in psychology go, this is one of the biggest and the trickiest. Psychotherapy comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes based on different schools of thought, and to clear up a common misconception here, most of them were not created by Freud. Different treatments might include something like mindfulness meditation, which focuses on being aware of your experience in the moment, or cognitive behavioral therapy, which works to identify and change the thought patterns or behaviors that lead to problems. Plenty of studies have shown that many types of psychotherapy are at least somewhat effective, but every so often you'll also hear about some paper that says it doesn't help at all. For example, a well-known article from 1983 published in the journal Behavioral and Brain Sciences, which reanalyzed 32 studies a previous paper had shown to be effective. But this second analysis found that there was no evidence for that. Instead, the researchers argued that the only studies that worked were the ones not done on real patients. Any study that had been done using real patients at a psychiatric hospital weren't shown to be any more effective than a placebo, a treatment that is fake but seems real. These contradictions are because, like with a lot of psychology research, the answer isn't so straightforward. One 2017 paper really broke this down. In it, researchers from Greece, Sweden, and the UK did an umbrella review of 247 meta-analyses that measured the effectiveness of psychotherapy. A meta-analysis is like a study of studies. It pulls together all relevant quantitative data covering similar research and experiments. An umbrella review takes that one step further. It's an analysis of the analyses. It's so meta. In total, this umbrella review covered more than 5,100 trials. Of the meta-analyses the researchers looked at, 80% of them had statistically significant evidence for whatever psychotherapy treatment they were looking at, meaning the difference in results probably didn't come from random chance. But the review showed that the majority of these analyses were littered with biases. Only 16 of them provided what the researchers called convincing evidence, meaning they were free from bias. The others contained things like publication bias, which can happen when researchers ignore negative findings or publish only positive ones, or allegiance bias. That's when the results of research are distorted by the investigator's own preferences for certain kinds of treatments, and it can inflate treatment effects by almost 30%. Now, this doesn't mean that we should throw all of our evidence about psychotherapy out the window. For one thing, this review found bias-free results for multiple well-supported types of therapy, like how cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is helpful for reducing anxiety symptoms. By changing the way patients interpret the world, this type of therapy is effective at reducing triggers that would fuel someone's symptoms. Like someone might interpret a quiet coworker as evidence that their office mate, and everyone else, hates them, which could cause restlessness, nausea, or other symptoms, but CBT might help them realize that their office mate might just be tired or shy instead. This review also found that when it was used along with medication, psychotherapy was more effective in putting depression into remission than medication alone. The umbrella review also found that, in addition to the 16 meta-analysis with convincing evidence, 20 of them had what researchers called highly suggestive evidence, so even though they had some bias, their conclusions were still pretty reliable. But the results of this review could mean that psychotherapy isn't always as effective as some research has suggested. It also means researchers need to be extra careful about how biases might affect their work, and that therapists need to look closely at the studies they're using to inform their practice. So the real challenge in this field of research isn't figuring out if psychotherapy works in general, because we're pretty confident it can help treat all kinds of things, even if you just take into account the studies without bias. The challenge is figuring out what will work on an individual level. Just because something works, on average, when you consider a big group of people overall, doesn't mean it will work for you specifically. Unlike with many other types of medical treatments, for most people, there's no set formula that will tell you exactly what type of psychotherapy you should use or whether it will help. That's mostly because there are all kinds of variables involved, from the skill level of your therapist to how vulnerable you're able to be with them. It also matters how long you keep coming to therapy, because 20 to 50% of people quit before the time recommended by their therapist. Some of that might be because of cost, but people also might feel like they aren't getting better fast enough, or like their symptoms are actually getting worse. Because that can happen with psychotherapy. When you're opening up about distressing topics you've hardly ever talked about before, your state of mind might get worse before it gets better. So there's a ton of pieces to figure out when it comes to what type of therapy will work best for someone, and most most of the time, therapists will look for solutions on a case-by-case basis. But just because we don't have psychotherapy's effectiveness perfectly figured out doesn't mean it isn't worthwhile. It just means that we have a lot more learning to do.
Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, what is narrative therapy? So narrative therapy is a therapeutic modality, and it can be used with families or with individuals. And it's based on a few key concepts surrounding the idea of a person's life and their story. And there are several stories in a person's life, and narrative therapy is looking at how to change a problem-saturated story into a more productive story. So part of the idea behind narrative therapy is that identity is formed by the narrative of a client's life. And there's actually several narratives that are at work, and this interpretation of the narrative can influence thinking, feeling, and behavior, and can result in mental health symptoms. Many narratives are useful, are healthy. We would consider them relatively normal. Other narratives are focused on difficulties. These are referred to as problem-saturated dominant stories. So symptoms come about when there's an unhealthy or negative narrative, or if there's a misunderstanding of the narrative, or a misrepresentation of the narrative. And this can interfere, this interpretation can interfere with an individual's ability to make changes. So narrative therapy has a lot of qualities about it that make it quite a bit different than a lot of other therapeutic modalities. To start off with, in narrative therapy, there's no diagnosis. So right away, you can see that narrative therapy breaks from mainstream modalities fairly significantly. There's no use of the diagnostic and statistical manual in narrative therapy, and no diagnosis is given initially or at any point during the therapeutic process. The problem is explored, mental health symptoms are explored, but they're never named with a diagnosis. So what a narrative therapist does is seek to understand the narrative, the positives, and the strengths of the client. They look for an alternative way to understand the narrative or to describe the narrative. The role of the therapist in narrative therapy is that of an investigative reporter, a non-directive collaborator. A therapist in this modality is extremely curious about the narrative, particularly the client's perception of the narrative, the client's point of view. And they're particularly curious about the nature of the problem. They're not particularly interested in the cause of the problem. Etiology is not really a part of narrative therapy, just like diagnosing isn't a part of it. But they are open to the client's description of the problem, what could be the cause. They're open to the client's perception of the cause. As I mentioned in narrative therapy, the narrative therapist attempts to externalize the problem. Now, this is a fairly common technique in a number of modalities. I think what makes it different for narrative therapy is the level of vigor brought to this concept. This is beyond just mere identification with the problem. So for example, if someone's treated by a cognitive behavioral therapist, I wouldn't be surprised if that therapist, if a person came in and said they were depressed, that therapist would say, you're a person with depression. A cognitive behavioral therapist would be reluctant to identify the person as depressed. They would look at depression as something external, a person with depression. With narrative therapy, they do that, but they take it further. So the externalized problem really takes on sometimes human characteristics. So as I mentioned, it's not merely just not identifying with the problem. It's looking at the problem as having a mind of its own, as trying to interfere with one's day, as being subtle or sneaky, being crafty, tricking the client. We see this particularly when using narrative therapy with adolescents or children. A behavioral problem will be externalized and given this identity as being subtle and trying to trick the child or adolescent into doing something that would be unacceptable. There's a phrase that's popular in narrative therapy that the person is not the problem is the problem. And this phrase is really seen throughout the theory, the whole theory of narrative therapy, and particularly with this externalizing the problem technique or position. Language is important to narrative therapists, self-talk, of course self-talk from cognitive behavioral therapy, and questions. As I mentioned, a narrative therapist is curious. They ask questions about influence and the future. So how does the problem influence the client? How does the client influence the problem? So kind of a systems theory at work here. And what's the future hold? There's a positive orientation and there's a willingness to explore the future. Narrative therapy, of course, is also willing to explore the past and look at the present as well. A narrative therapist seeks to emphasize an alternative story, to help a client to build an alternative story. They believe that positive stories lead to preferred outcomes. There's a term in narrative therapy, unique outcomes, and these are exceptions to the dominant story, much like we would see in solution-focused therapy. Narrative therapists also refer to these exceptions as sparkling moments. So again, emphasizing that curiosity and good listening skills and really paying attention. There's other features we see with narrative therapy, letters. These can be letters written on paper or emails or some other way of communicating, but it'd be written communication. And these are provided after the session. They could include information about the alternative story, unique outcomes, and of course they're generally supportive. Also, narrative therapy, as I mentioned, can be used for families or with individuals, but even when it's used with individuals, there's an emphasis on including other family members. So again, here we see a little bit of systems theory at work in narrative therapy. So a narrative therapist tries to deconstruct a problem-saturated narrative, separate the story from the client, rewrite the narrative, accurately understand this new narrative, and ensure that this new narrative facilitates change, the kind of change the client is looking for, one of the goals of therapy. Narrative therapists seek to reconstruct identity, and they have an awareness of larger societal issues, socio-cultural and political effects that are acting on the client. So when we look at pure narrative therapy, it's a postmodern and constructivist approach. There's an emphasis on social justice. As I mentioned before, etiology is not a concern in narrative therapy, causation. So how about the limitations of narrative therapy? Well, narrative therapy has a lot of positives. It also has some limitations. One of the major limitations is that there's a lack of research demonstrating that narrative therapy is effective. There are a number of reasons for the lack of research. One of the arguments that I've heard that explains why there's a lack of research has to do with the scientific method and the view that narrative therapists have. The scientific method is about seeking truth, but in narrative therapy, knowledge is subjectively constructed, and there is no universal truth. So some narrative therapists have made the argument that narrative therapy should be studied qualitatively, for example with the phenomenological approach, and not quantitatively. And that's what we usually think of with the scientific method. Now this argument can certainly be appreciated. Certainly narrative therapy has a philosophy that seems much more qualitative than quantitative. But really when we look at therapeutic modalities and we try to measure effectiveness, we do so usually by seeing if a client's goals were achieved and seeing if certain symptoms are reduced, like reduced depression, reduced anxiety. So narrative therapy certainly could be studied with the scientific method. Again, I appreciate the philosophy and how the philosophy is a key part of narrative therapy. But to say that narrative therapy can't be studied because it has a particular philosophy doesn't really ring true to me. The scientific method has been used to evaluate many, many modalities over the years, and narrative therapy is not an exception to that. It can be studied with the scientific method, in my opinion. Another criticism I hear of narrative therapy is that it's relativistic, and that if pure narrative therapy is applied, a narrative therapist would be predisposed to have a client isolate themselves from social support. Now, I can appreciate these criticisms, and I certainly see the relativistic criticism. Narrative therapy does appear relativistic. In terms of isolating clients from social support, probably what's being referred to there is isolating clients from the dominant culture. So again, this goes back to a philosophy in narrative therapy more so than a technique. A narrative therapist who follows the rules of narrative therapy strictly, I suppose, could be tempted to influence a client to break away from the dominant culture, the dominant story, which may or may not be a good thing for the client. However, this is a technique based on the ideology of narrative therapy that can be easily sidestepped. A narrative therapist can adopt many of the principles and techniques of narrative therapy and not take it to what some would consider an extreme, which is having the client break away from the dominant culture or dominant story. Certainly moving away from the dominant story to an alternative story is part of the therapy, but that doesn't mean that the client has to reject society or reject a significant part of society. That's probably taking narrative therapy really to an extreme, and I would be surprised if a large number of narrative therapists included this as part of their practice. Although, again, with the lack of research, it's hard to be certain on this issue. So narrative therapy overall is an interesting therapy. It offers a unique perspective. It values the perspective of the client, and it's creative. You can use a lot of features in storytelling when you bring storytelling and the narrative into therapeutic work. So I like a lot of the elements of narrative therapy. I wish we had more research on it. That would be helpful. And there are some concerns about how the philosophy could be extended in a way that would not be helpful for a client. Narrative therapy is a modality that I see as easily integrated into other modalities. So if someone didn't want to practice as a narrative therapist exclusively, I believe they could take a lot of the techniques of narrative therapy and bring them into whatever the main modality is they use. For example, CBT or existential therapy. Narrative therapy, I think, goes along well with a lot of other modalities. I hope you found this description of narrative therapy to be interesting. Thanks for watching. Hey, April, how you doing today?
I'm okay.
Okay.
A little bit anxious lately. I've got a lot of pressure coming up at work. And as we talked about before, work is kind of a struggle for me because of all the pressure I'm under.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're feeling a bit anxious and it's work related.
Yeah.
So what's going on there?
Well, I'm a member of HR and I'm we have hiring fairs and other things where we need to hire people, and there's only like 2 or 3 of us to do the job, and next week we have an event where we need to hire some people, and I'm just really worried about hiring the right people and making these tough decisions about like the future of our company.
All right, so you're worried that you'll select people that aren't ideal for the positions?
Right, like that's happened before where someone's done that and hired some wrong people, and like some things happened in the company and then that person got in trouble for it. So I just want to make sure I hire like people who are going to be good for our company, and there's a lot that rests on like my judgment.
And the worrying gets in the way of the judgment.
Yeah, because I kind of second guess my instincts on people and if they will be good.
How long has the worrying been part of your life?
For as long as I can remember. I'm just like a worrier. Like I worry about everything.
Worry about everything. So
Yeah.
not just interviewing people, but other areas as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But this interviewing people, this worry is more intense right now. This is what you're thinking about now.
Right. Like I don't want to be fired for, hiring the wrong people, or I don't want my company to not do well because I hired the wrong people. Like it's a lot of pressure for me, I feel like. So I'm really nervous.
All right, so it sounds like you're really struggling with this. You're worried about the company you work for and your own job.
Yeah.
And your performance. And you mentioned that you're a worrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I worry about everything.
It's kind of how you view yourself.
Definitely.
So what if we reframe this another way and think about the worry as a separate entity? Right? So you're kind of identifying as a worrier now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's part of you.
Right. Like it's who I am.
Like it's who you are. But in actuality, the worry is external to a degree, right? So So let's have you here. Let's move the worry over here a bit. And think of the worry as almost a separate entity.
Okay.
Right? So what's the worry trying to do to you? What's the separate entity of worry trying to do?
The worry seems like it's trying to make me doubt myself and, question my own judgment and not have faith that I'll make the right choice.
All right, so it's generally disrupting you from your...
Yeah, I don't have as much confidence.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the worry's over here. So worry's over here, and it's making these attempts to lower your confidence, make you question how good you are at your job.
Right.
In a way, it's trying to manipulate you into believing those things.
Right.
What does evidence suggest in terms of your history in this particular function, as your function of interviewing people? How have you performed?
I think I've done okay so far.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've been doing this particular job for a while now, and I'm one of the people they rely on to do it the most, like to hire the most people. So I would say I'm doing a pretty good job right now, but it's kind of like, seeing what happened to somebody else, I'm kind of like worried about that.
All right, so the evidence tells you that, if you evaluate the evidence, it tells you that you're doing okay in that job,
Mm-hmm.
but you see other people that haven't done as well.
Right.
And that's when that worry comes back and tries to convince you that you're not going to do well.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you say to the worry the next time it comes in? Like, what can you communicate to the worry?
I guess I could say that so far I've hired some people who have been worthwhile to the company, and they trust me to do this job. My bosses trust me to do this job, so chances are I'll make an informed decision based on my experience.
All right, so that's the challenge that you can put up against worry when it comes to try to influence you. All right. Is that something you feel you can do the next time you have thoughts of worry?
It's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the worry voice is really loud sometimes.
It's a strong voice.
Yeah.
Try to think of it when that voice is audible. Try to think of it as something external, right? Not necessarily something internal, like you're a worrier, like that thought, but more like worries outside of me and worries trying to come in.
Like trying to influence or manipulate me.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, try to reframe it in that way, rather than identifying as a worrier. I know that's real for you, and that's how you identify. But let's try this experiment where we treat the worry as kind of an outsider that's encroaching in on your territory and disrupting your job a bit, and then your job then would be to challenge the thoughts that worry tries to introduce.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So when's the next time you'll be interviewing people for your job?
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. So you feel like next Wednesday you can apply that kind of reframe?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Give that a try, and then I'll see you in a week, and we'll build from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, April.
Family therapy, which is also called systemic psychotherapy, is a therapy that focuses on relationships.
Family therapy generally is seen as working with families, and that's an important part of what we as family therapists do. But it's not only working with families, it's also working with couples and working with individuals.
Family therapists will see individuals, and a lot of the time they will work with that individual very effectively in terms of their family relationships, but the whole family doesn't need to be there.
It's a very common experience that one part of the couple will come for therapy and the other person doesn't want to come. So we would work with that one individual in trying to help the other person perhaps see the benefits, but to try and understand why they're not coming and how to see it from their perspective, thereby making it a safe place for them to come at some point. And very often they do.
I think a lot of time I probably would have been reluctant to go into therapy, you know, from that standpoint of stubbornness and I'm not taking the blame here, you know, but it's not really about blame and who's at fault. It's just really more about, you know, two people working out where the issues are actually arising from and giving a solution.
What a family therapist does is try to understand what is this problem in terms of the overall relationships in the family. What is this problem trying to tell us about communication patterns?
I think that we wouldn't have survived had we not gone to therapy.
I think all of us are aware that we carry too much baggage, we carry too much fear, too much worry, too much of our past, fear of the future.
When one person steps out and asks for help, that's the start.
The family systems perspective holds that individuals are best understood within the context of relationships and through assessing the interactions within an entire family. Symptoms are often viewed as an expression of a dysfunction within a family. These dysfunctional patterns are often thought to be passed across several generations. This perspective is grounded on the assumptions that a client's problematic behavior may 1. Serve a function or purpose for the family, 2. Be a function of the family's inability to operate productively, especially during developmental transitions, or 3. Be a symptom of dysfunctional patterns handed down across generations. The family therapy perspective calls for a conceptual shift. Actions by any individual family member will influence all the others in the family, and their reactions will have a reciprocal effect on the individual.
The origins of structural family therapy can be traced to the early 1960s, when Salvador Minuchin was conducting therapy, training, and research with delinquent boys from poor families at the Willich School in New York. According to Minuchin, a family structure is an invisible set of functional demands or rules that organize the way family members relate to one another. The family is considered a basic human system. The term subsystems encompasses various categories, for instance, spousal, parental, sibling, and extended. Determining that the parent subsystem is appropriately separate from the child subsystem is central to structural therapy. The emotional barriers that protect and enhance the integrity of individuals, subsystems, and families are referred to as boundaries. These interpersonal boundaries can best be conceptualized on a continuum ranging from rigid to diffuse. In the middle of the continuum between rigid and diffuse boundaries are clear or healthy boundaries, which consist of an appropriate blending of rigid and diffuse characteristics. Minuchin employs a method for mapping the structure of the family. In drawing a family map, transactional styles are identified as enmeshed or disengaged. In enactments, the therapist asks family members to engage in some conflict situation that would happen at home. This allows the therapist to observe how family members interact and to draw conclusions about the structure of the family. The therapist also blocks existing patterns, determines the family's ability to accommodate to different rules, and encourages members to experiment with more functional rules. Sometimes therapists cast a new light and provide a different interpretation to a problem situation within a family. The presenting problem can then be explored in different ways that allow the family to understand an original complaint from many angles.
My name's Don, and the reason that we're in therapy is I really love my kids, but I can't take it anymore. The fighting has just gotten insane, and you know, my son Ben, I almost hit him last week, and that scares me. So I knew we needed some help.
Hi, my name is Angela. I am the mother of Ben and Heather. And since Dawn and I got divorced last year, apparently Ben has had some issues, and from what I've heard, the family life just has kind of fallen apart, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know why my ex-husband is having so many issues with the kids. Everything was fine before the divorce, but I'm concerned. It seems like there's some issues that need to be resolved, and I'm glad that they're all going to get help.
Hi, my name is Heather, and
I'm the youngest child in our family. We're here in therapy. Things have been a little bit stressful lately. I feel like my relationship with my dad has been really good. It's always been good, but my relationship with my brother Ben has just been really crazy lately, and it's just put a lot on our family.
My name is Ben. I'm here at therapy because Donald, my dad, just said to go. I guess it's just another punishment. I don't know, it seems like everything I do is wrong, and my sister and I can do the same thing, and I'm the one who gets in trouble for it. So, I don't know, that's why I'm here.
Well, it's one thing to talk about the relationships in your family, but I think what might make this a little bit more clear is to have you guys reenact a scenario that typically has happened in your family, an argument that's happened per se, and this will kind of help me see the family dynamics at work. So, Ben, what's something that's happened lately, or an argument perhaps that you've had with a family member?
The other night, I got home from my buddy Paul's place. It wasn't late, it was like 2:30, 3 in the morning. Park in the driveway, leave a little room so someone in the garage can get out. If they can't, I always leave my keys right by the front door. Come in, go to bed, wake up the next morning like 6:30. Heather's there pounding on my door, yelling at me to move my car.
Okay.
I say, move it yourself. The keys are right there by the door. No, no, she makes me get up.
Okay, so why don't I stop this right here, and I actually want you to, Heather, Ben, to reenact that fight for me.
Okay.
Why don't I have you guys start from the point where you were pounding on his door, he woke up, and that's where the conversation started.
Okay.
What you said.
Move it yourself.
Okay, move it yourself. Go.
I said, no, I have to be at school. It's not my responsibility to move your piece of shit car.
I just got in bed. I mean, I just yelled, move it yourself.
Whose
Tell her
fault
where the
is
keys
that,
are.
that you decided to go to bed at
Ben, I'm
6
tired
a.m.?
of you coming home so freaking late at night. Your sister has to get up to go to class in the morning.
I
It's
sleep
not
later,
appropriate.
I sleep later, I work later, I stay out later. I still
Yeah,
have a job,
all
I still
hours
get
of the
things
night,
done.
all over town. We don't know where you are.
So Don, what if I were to tell you that I'm going to give you permission to not get involved in these arguments? I'm going to give you permission to be a parent. Remember we did our genogram, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had the parents at one level of the hierarchy, and we had the kids at the lower level of the hierarchy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you out of the role of having to get in the middle of their argument, and I'm going to have you stand back and be a parent. I'm going to give you permission. I'm going to give you freedom not to have to participate in this. And we'll see how that feels. It might feel a little weird at first, so are you willing to try it?
I'll try.
Okay. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to reenact the same scenario, but in a different way. So first, Don, I'd like you to trade places with your son.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to have you guys have a dialogue here, back and forth, kind of like we just did. And you identify something that you need from the other person, okay? And Dad, we get to sit back and watch this, okay?
Okay.
All right. So, ready? Action.
I feel like, I'm just worried about you, and I just, we miss you. Me and Dad, we're always...
Hold on. Talk from you.
Okay.
Talk from you.
I miss you, and I just don't really feel like you've been very available in our family. And this argument that we just had, it's just one little example of the bigger picture of you not being available and not really respecting me.
I guess I don't like getting woken up when I just fell asleep, but that's a small part of it too. I guess, more importantly, I need you to back me up sometimes, sis. Like when Dad's getting on my case and you walk by, like you just immediately jump in on his side, and you never back me up, and I could use that.
Okay. Well done. All right. I'm going to ask you guys, how did that feel? And how is that different from the first situation? Ben, let's check in with you.
It was weird just getting to talk to her without yelling.
Incredible how that works. Heather, what was your take on the situation?
It was nice. I felt really, like he listened to what I said and was really present and felt like a real conversation.
Okay. Now, Dawn, appreciate your patience in watching this. Was that difficult for you to watch without trying to?
Yeah, I definitely felt like Heather wasn't getting a chance to say all the things that she needed to.
Okay. Why don't I have you comment on the interaction between the two of them? What did that feel like to you?
Audio Jungle.